So I'd like to thank you for joining me. I enjoyed seeing you in The Illusionist, so excited to have you on my podcast.
Oh, it's great. Thanks for having me. It was nice to meet you too.
Of course. And so for the first part, can you please introduce yourself for those who don't know who you are?
So my name is Chris Cox, and I'm a mind reader who can't read minds.
That's awesome. And so what made you want to become a mentalist?
I was a kid who always was a performer, and I always did magic when I was young, and was in a lot of shows and did some TV things. And I can't act, dance, or sing, and therefore magic. And I quite quickly, in the world of magic, I got into mentalism and mind reading, and just enjoyed doing that because really, to me, it's all performance. The how about the trick is the irrelevant bit. The why is somewhat important, but for me, it's all about the performance of it. So yeah, I then went and did. I used my student loan to go and do a show at the Edinburgh Festival, and that went well, and have kept doing that ever since, really.
That's awesome. And so so I understand you make all your tricks, like all tricks that are ones that you create. What is the process of creating a new trick?
Good question. It changes. I sort of think the best way to explain it is to think of yourself like a chef. So you learn as you start learning about magic and mind reading, you learn the ingredients. So you learn the basic methods, you learn the things that you need to know. And once you've got those ingredients and techniques down, you can then start to make your own thing out of those. So sometimes a trick will involve coming up with a new method. Sometimes it will be finding a thing where you're like, oh, that's a nice idea, and you'll turn it into something for you. For me, I always start with the what do I think would be good? What would be fun? What would be funny? What would be interesting? And from there, I kind of work out what I think the routine or the effect might be and what the beats of it are. And sort of the last thing really is always the how, because it's sort of the most irrelevant thing for me. It needs to work. I'll find a way to make it work. But the kind of the structure, the performance, the vibe, the effect I want to get across, be that an image or a starting point for an idea, that's where I begin. And then from there I literally beat it out and I think about it and I talk to friends about it and go kind of through a beat sheet of what I think it would be. And there's always many variables and you sort of just get to a point where you keep refining it and eventually it becomes an effect.
That's great. And so you've been with the Illusionist for a little while now. You've done a couple of shows with them, like on tour, and I'm pretty sure Broadway too, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
so I've done with the Illusionist, I've done a Mexico tour, South Africa tour, Australia tour, Sydney Opera House residency, Reno residency, London's West End, Broadway, and I think 4 or 5 US tours now. And we just did a week at the Kennedy Center in DC as well.
That's great. And so what's been your favorite place to be with the Illusionist and why?
I think Broadway is Broadway and the West End and Sydney Opera House. They're kind of like the big hitters. Kennedy Center was a lot of fun recently. Actually, it's a beautiful room. But Broadway was amazing because we did a show at the Neil Simon Theatre, which is when I was 21 and I came from London to New York and I saw Hairspray at the Neil Simon Theatre as my first show on Broadway, and then to get to do a show there and live in New York was great. Sydney Opera House was amazing because it's iconic. London was great. That was my third West End run, and it's always with like a nice group of people. So yeah, it's sort of difficult to pick because they change, but those ones always kind of spring to mind as big kind of career defining moments, I suppose.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so, has there ever been a time where you've been on stage and you've somehow messed up the trick, and how did you overcome that?
You know what? I get that question quite often, and the real answer is no, not really, because I'm good at what I do, but not in an egotistical way. But I feel like, there are the reason I get paid to do a show like The Illusionist, I think, isn't to do the show, it's to not screw the show up. So it's to know what I'm going to do when stuff goes wrong. So that comes from a wealth of experience in doing this for many years. It comes from pre-planning moments that might go wrong and what I would do in that moment. It comes from if something does go wrong, finding out a way to make sure that doesn't go wrong again. And there's always variables and things change and they're different every night. And I use different people and stuff might go wrong, but you would have no idea it's gone wrong because I sort of preempted the fact, well, if this bit doesn't work, then I go this way and it changes. So it's that thing of like, I'm at my most nervous when I'm trying something new. And in my earlier career, stuff did go wrong, and it was horrible. And you kind of find yourself a way to make sure that doesn't happen again. And it's just sort of preparing and planning and preparation. And yes, we've had show stops, and yes, the lights have gone or the sound's gone, and there are things which are out of my control. And you just kind of have to learn to lean into that, and that's always going to be a part of it. And I think if you try and hide it, then audiences can sniff something's up. Where if you are human and genuine about it, audiences know. No, I was doing a thing the other week, and it got to a point where there was a problem with the video content, and I was like, well, I've got two options here. I can pretend there's not a problem, or I can say to everyone, have you noticed there's a problem? Great, let's just give the guys a minute to reset everything, and that is always a much better option.
That's awesome. And so, have you ever done your mentalism on any like American talent shows, like America's Got Talent, Penn and Teller, or anything like that?
I was on the Today Show, which was great. That was a lot of fun. Always kind of stressful things, particularly early morning starts. And the Today Show is a big show, and it was live, and it was the day after Christmas. I was on it, and that thing of like you get there and you're never quite sure how it's going to go. You don't know the people, and you're trying to promote the show, and then go and do the show straight after that show, and make sure the effect works and it's fun. So yeah, that kind of is a great experience, and it's sort of footage I'm very proud of, and it's kind of that thing of like it's nice because people are inherently interested in what I do, and therefore actually being able to talk about it and give an example of it and show it is always a fun way to do it.
That's great. And so, what's the hardest part about being a mentalist as a career?
Um, I think it's the good part and the bad part are somewhat linked in that I never really know how it's going to go. It should go well because I've done it long enough, but it is always different every night. And that person I get on stage and who I use can affect and change things. So that is quite difficult. The other thing is that, what I do is very much a form of entertainment on stage, and I only do it on stages. And it's always slightly difficult when people maybe after a show or in interviews like this or something where people kind of you kind of want to believe it's real, but I'm honest in the fact that it's not real. I'm a mind reader who can't read mind. Is it's real but not really real and works in that moment. So it's always kind of occasionally at stage door or something someone will be like, oh, tell me what I'm thinking, and I've got kind of jokes to avoid that, but there's always the element of like, oh, I'm sort of a more disappointing version of me because the version you see on stage is a characterized version of me and is part of a show. It's sort of like, like you've got the Wicked poster behind you. It's like whoever's playing Alphabet coming off and people being disappointed that she's not green in real life. I think that is kind of always a slight worry that people are disappointed that I'm not really a mind reader, despite it looking like I am one.
Yeah, I agree. And so, if you could go back in time and give advice to your younger self, what advice would you give him?
I don't think I would. It's a good question. I don't think I've got much advice. I think I was lucky that when I was young, I knew what I wanted to do, and I don't think I'm always scared that if you affect the past, you can affect the future. So if that is a real one, I'd avoid myself at any point because I'm very happy with what I've got to do. I think the things which I think I miss now, I'm slightly older, which I think you kind of don't realize you have when you're young. So if you're younger and you're watching this, you have a superpower at a younger age, which is to just do stuff. Like I went and just saved up some money and did my first show, and I didn't even think about whether it would go wrong or whether it would be any good. I was like, I wanted to do this, so I did it. And the older you get, the more responsibilities you have, and the more worries you have, and the more I'm like, oh, is this going to be any good? Is this a smart choice? Where when you're younger, you just do things. So the best advice I can give to my younger self would be to just do it. Just keep doing what you're doing. Don't worry about it. Just try it.
That's awesome. And so, what would you tell other students who want to create their own magic show and do a stage show for the first time?
I think that question comes down to why you're doing a magic show. Why is magic the form you've chosen to express your art, for want of a slightly better phrase? It always comes down to the why. Why you're doing it? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to evoke in an audience? Are you, the advice I'd give is that inherently, I don't really like magic. A lot of magic I see, I really hate. And it's often because the magician is playing the role of status and look what I can do that you can't. And that I find not enjoyable for an audience member. So I suppose the advice I would give is find you as the performer. That's the interesting part. That's the real part of this world of artifice that we live in, and use your tricks that you're going to do and your effects to help support that, and treat your audience with care and intelligence, and Yeah, and kind of it's difficult to say don't show off because inherently that's what we do. But you don't ever see a musical or a play where you think, oh, that actor's showing off. They're not, they're just doing their job. Where I think you often see a lot of magic and it feels like they're showing off. And I think taking a kind of a leaf from the world outside of magic and other performing arts is integral to being a good magician because really, um, I'm not a magician. I'm a performer and I do magic. I think that's the difference.
That's great. And so this next question ties into one of the other ones, but what advice would you give to younger students who would like to become a magician as a career?
I think the advice is it's why magic, really. I think, magic is a great thing that I think nearly every child I've ever met has had a magic kit at some stage. And, I have a few friends of mine who are full-time magicians and like me have took that magic kit and carried on with it. And lots of people who learn magic as a kid and go, that's it. And I think the joy of magic is it teaches you, it can be a social crutch. If you're a bit nervous to speak to people or you're concerned about your personality, you can use magic as a way to speak to people and integrate yourself. But also, it teaches you things like critical thinking, and rehearsal, and interaction, and being with people. And those skills, I think, are really useful whatever you go and do in your life. So I think, the advice I'd give is it doesn't have to be magic, even if you're into magic now. I think it's just another paint color to help paint that canvas of life with.
That's great. And so that wraps up the interview portion. If there's anything else you would like to say, go ahead and na do it now. Other than that, I'm gonna pause and I'll talk about logistics with this.
No, I'm all good. Thank you.
That sounds good.